And this is a good place to start talking about the steam shop and how it has evolved. As I mentioned, the crew, Steve Lee and all the Bob Krieger and all of the gentlemen that so carefully guided and managed the program through many, many years, built a tremendous infrastructure in Cheyenne. And for many years they'd maintained the 3985, and that's a fascinating story in itself. The effort to get that locomotive back out and restore it and add it to the fleet. So what we're doing now is we're going to take the facility. You can see this, it has a acoustic tile ceiling, and it's positioned in such a way is it's rather low, especially in that low bay. We've got new requirements in the modern era. OSHA and other initiatives, other requirements require employees to have what we call fall protection. And that is a requirement that we cannot and we will not get around. So the fall ceiling in a lot of ways was in the way of the improvements that we needed to make. Not only that, there was generations of pigeons, numbering in the hundreds, that had resided and taken up residency above that area. And so everything above that false ceiling was this beautiful aviary for that species. And I remember one time back in 2010 and 2011, I climbed up a ladder and poked my head up through there, and I can't tell you how demoralized I was to see the filth and the nesting materials and the pigeon carcasses as far as the eye could see over the entire expanse of that shop. How are we going to fix this? And how do you fix something like that? Well, it requires a specialized contractor. There were areas of the shop where the pigeons were roosting that the tiles and the insulation was so laden with material that it was at risk of falling in on us. So something had to be done. So again, part of a plan and a process, getting the approvals, selling the idea that, hey, this is what we need to do to improve the facility. We've got some health issues here with the pigeons. We clearly are going to clean that up. Well, now we need to start at this step and begin this process and move on to the next steps, and that is renovating the building, bringing it back to an era in which it was when it was built. Building is nearly 100 years old. Windows are falling in. Portions of the windows have been covered up with tin. And the roof over many periods of the time over the years has leaked at odd occasions. And so you've got wood that's getting weakened and so forth. So a lot of things to address. Repointing the brick, addressing other structural concerns, assessing the steel superstructure to determine if it will, in fact, support the weight of an overhead crane. So this is where we're beginning. Another picture, another crew shot. This was taken a little while back. We were involved in some superheater work on the 844. And in many cases, you can see we're all dirty. This is a crew, this is a job, and I think it goes back in all eras. That this is not just a job. When you show up to work, you do this job and this job only. Everybody has to pitch in. The spirit of teamwork is necessary, or we're really going to have a hard time. Rotary snowplow. Part of our responsibility is maintaining that equipment. That fits in well with the Heritage Fleet mission. It's very specialized. There was a day when a lot of people were qualified on snow fighting equipment of all varieties. In this modern era today, with the railroad being what it is and weather patterns and so forth, there's not many occasions, with the exception of the Donna region, that you would deploy such massive snow fighting equipment. But when it is needed right now. And so it's our responsibility to maintain that as well and develop a vision and a plan to keep that equipment running. We're going to rebuild that, going to re-engine it, put a new alternator in it, and go through the drive and everything that we need to make sure that it's suitable. It's in good shape, but it's got some electrical issues that need upgrading. So the next few slides are some of the work that we did getting the rotary snowplow ready. It hadn't operated in some time. The last time we operated it was in 2007, New Year's Day. And there was a few deficiencies, so we corrected those. And we've got the hood. It's known as a scoop wheel. And the chute is positioned to work with the direction of the wheel to discharge the snow right or left. The bushings were worn out. The hydraulic system needed some attention, and there had been some components that were dismantled, and they were still in place, but they were disconnected. So we went through the hydraulic system and we removed all of that, and we replaced all the hydraulic hoses, hydraulic pump, did everything we needed to do to make sure it was serviceable. And that's a part of the chute housing, a new bearing. We did some work to clean that up, so now the chute works very well. Now we've got some of our support equipment. We coordinate with our partners at Council Bluffs in the car shop to service our fleet of passenger cars, our support equipment. So here we've got the boiler dorm. It's undergoing its maintenance, receiving new wheels, truck work, air brake work, and all the necessary things that are important when you operate railroad equipment. They've got a great facility there. Now we've zoomed back to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and we're stripping off the hot water pump off the 844. And some of these I just kind of added in there. This is a CAD drawing.
Thank you.
So what we do is we're in the process of working on the locomotive. We have to reassemble the locomotive as we put it back together. Why not reassemble with new parts? As much as we love the history and the heritage and the originality of equipment, there comes a time when components reach the end of their useful, serviceable life. And such is the case on many of these components. So with the aid of computer-aided drafting, Austin can design all of these parts, and we can have them produced at a steel facility, arrive at the shop at the proper coordinated time, and we'll reassemble them back on the locomotive. Not only is this important on the structural components, but it's critical on the boiler side as well. This is a crosshead off the UP844 with new lining. These locomotives have a unique design. This is known as a multiple bearing crosshead, and that's new tin lining. And that lining has to be applied through it's not rocket science, but there is an art to tinning. And we've identified a vendor that can do outstanding work. They tin massive components and bearings in the power plant industry. And then we had that component intricately machined, and it fits up inside a newly machined crosshead guide. It's been in service since 2011. Here's parts of the boiler, some of the studs that we'll replace, and we discovered some corrosion that we've had to address. And as part of that analysis, we want to verify that the pressure vessel is still safe and suitable. That's a normal process that locomotives undergo traditionally every 15 years. Sometimes you don't make it 15 years, you hope you do, but it's a very important part and it's a regulatory requirement. So this was part of the analysis. We've got some bolts welded to various parts of the boiler that we'll correct, and you can see some of the corrosion there. And stay bolt caps. Again, as part of the regulatory requirement, the stay bolt caps, they have to meet a material specification, and they cannot show signs of material defects or mechanical impact or any other sort of damage. So the stay bolt caps will be renewed as well. And it's a good time to go through when you analyze everything and you go from start to finish. More parts and pieces, some of which we have up here. This is part of a water glass. You can see on the left side, you probably won't make out the cracks, but this is an old component. Been in service since probably the 1940s. So we've duplicated that. And the material, again, it's exactly what the material specification calls for. That can be a little bit of a challenge. And the same thing, we've got washout plugs. Washout plugs are provided to, as that implies, to wash the locomotive boiler. Again, washout plugs that have been in service for decades. They go well back, probably about the time my father was born. And so again, the material's at the end of its serviceable life. So we've replicated that with a steel core, a forged steel core, and the correct bronze cast around that, and we'll machine those and put them in service, and we have enough for all 3 classes plus a spare set. So that's the other part of the story that is so exciting for us, because now it's an opportunity to revisit what our tooling needs will be. And the tooling that we need on 844, 3985, 4014, there's commonality and a lot of interchangeability with the stay bolts and the application of the stay bolt tools and all of the various tools that you need. And as life goes on, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because we don't have the tooling that was present back in the day. And the tooling that we do have, again, like other things, it's reaching the end of its serviceability. So now is a great opportunity for us to reinforce that infrastructure and design where we have to and have made all the special tooling that we need. Cutters, reamers, stable installation tools, all of the various things that we have. Steam valves, steam piping, copper piping, I mean, you name it. Locomotive tires, locomotive springs. I mean, it's staggering. The procurements that we've made and that we've got in the pipeline, all new springs for the 844, all new springs for the big boy, all new springs as needed for the Challenger. I mean, it's really an exciting process. Here we are working on our aerial work platforms. These are man lifts. So anytime we get up and we have to work off of any area to access the locomotive, we have to be able to get up there safely and in compliance with our company mandated policies. And that's just another step in what you have to do to undertake maintenance in a railroad shop today. Well, as we began to drop the driver to access the combustion chamber stable caps, our drop table quit working on us. And it's a unit that was built in 1940, and it's put in many, many years of service. Well, it wasn't going to work for us, so we had to drop everything. Now we got to get a hold of the manufacturer. Can you fix it? The answer is maybe. That model's been obsolete since 1970. We don't have anything for it, and anything that we do is going to be custom. Ship it to us. We'll have it back to you in about a year. So that's not an option. So, true to the spirit of the Union Pacific, guess who's going to rebuild that? We will. A quick talk about a flat car that we have there, and this flat car was obtained back in 2011 for the 3985 rebuild that was we were about to undertake, and that will support the front of the big boy. Put a new deck on that. We used it to shuttle equipment back and forth and store it over in the roundhouse, and when the timing is right, that's going to support the front of the big boy as we remove the front engine. Some more housekeeping and tools. Every Friday we have about an hour of the workday we spend cleaning the facility, picking up our tools and inventorying everything and going through and making the shop safe. We have a 155-pound forging hammer that we bought, and that will serve us very well. It already has. We'll be able to forge. It's not like a forging hammer that the railroad had to forge side rods or axles or anything of that size, but creative, competent folks can do wonders with such a hammer. We've positioned this out by the north end of the building, and just in the several times that we've used it, it has exposed some, how should I put this? The shop is half the size that it used to be, and there's large air ducts present that run east to west. Well, the physical impact, and I can feel this in the office when they're running that thing, bang, 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 bang. Well, it's settled the ground enough that we've got a few holes that are appearing out in the parking lot. A Bridgeport mill that we rebuilt. Again, equipment goes through a cycle, and some of the equipment very well used and served many, many years, and it was time for us to replace bearings and rework things, fixing digital readouts and buying new tooling and vices and things that you just go through. Same thing on a lathe, the beautiful 1952 Monarch lathe. It's a sweetheart of a lathe. So we went through that, tightened it up, bought some new tooling for it. This is part of the spoke box. This is a blower piping. I put that in there because that's my weld. I get to do a little bit of welding here and there. Most of my time is spent planning and doing things of that nature, but occasionally when times are tight, I'll get out and I'll help everybody. And this is the newly rebuilt burner for the 844. Not unlike what will go in the UP 4014. And here we are when we discovered the drop table's not working. So we blocked the driver up so we could lower the table and figure out what's wrong with the drop table. So as we began to get into the drop table, it was determined that we can't work down here. There's about a foot of oil and water. And that was part of the problem. So we pulled the table out. And that's another advantage of having the false ceiling removed. Now we can get large cranes into the facility, providing we can drive them in the door. And we can do what we need to do to move equipment, to lift things, and that came very handy. This is a 16,000-pound drop table. So we lifted it up out of the pit, and we built a set of 3-foot 9-inch gauge track, because we can do track work now. And we set that on there, and for several months we went through and we made whatever parts we needed to. It's not perfect, but it is now safe and it now works. And now we put it all back together. Again, we successfully were able to get onto eBay and find some obsolete parts, some obsolete bearings that were still out in the industry. And so we did what we had to do and machined components and pressed things apart and heated things up and shrunk them back together and did what we needed to do to get it running again. And there's a nicely newly serviced, it's called a screw, a jacking screw. And right here is a bronze nut. And that's a buttress thread that's designed to take tremendous thrust. There's approximately 12 tons of force on each of the 4 corners. It's a 50-ton table. And that's what physically lowers and allows the component to descend down into the pit. Well, now we're going to put it back in. Again, working from heights in an aerial work platform, doing our thing, getting ready to go to pick that up. Unfortunately, we didn't have access to the big crane that we used to pick it up out of the ground. So that took nearly all day to get it put back in, but we were able to get it back in. As you can see, we're lowering it back down. And now we've got the driver out of the 844, pulling it out. And that's it. I've got a whole other series of pictures about the parking lot and more big boy, and we could go on for hours. But that concludes my presentation for the day, and at this time, we'll open it for questions.